My name is Melissa Bocci, and I'd like to tell you about my article that appears in this issue of the Foreign Language Annals. As a world language educator and an advocate for community-engaged service learning, I'm always exploring ways to effectively promote students' language proficiency development while also strongly attending to the World Readiness Standards call to make world language classrooms more interdisciplinary, community-centered, culturally competent, and experiential. A few semesters ago, I, as a university researcher, partnered with a classroom teacher in a local public high school to integrate a Youth Participatory Action Research, or YPAR, project into her Spanish for Native Speakers course. In a YPAR project, students are empowered as knowledge producers and taught qualitative and/or quantitative research skills that they use to investigate social problems that they identify as meaningful in their lives. The results of their investigations inform subsequent actions that they take in their communities to help remedy the problems they studied. There is great potential within this YPAR framework for developing students' language proficiency in community-engaged, cognitively challenging, hands-on, contextualized ways. It fits within existing world language approaches, having much in common with project-based learning methods and content-based instruction. But YPAR is not commonly used in world language classrooms. So my article's purpose is twofold: to examine YPAR as a method for world language education by connecting it to existing practices and research within world language education, and by delineating how it attends to the world readiness standards and 21st century skills. And second, to present the results of a study that investigated teacher and learner perceptions of global proficiency levels and learning gains, as measured by the Linguafolio assessment tools. In this video, I will focus on first describing how we used YPAR to facilitate student learning and how those strategies connected to the world readiness standards. Lastly, I'll share an overview of my findings regarding language proficiency development. In our project, the semester was divided into three main phases. First, identity exploration and consciousness raising. Second, research design and implementation. And third, presentation and action. In the first phase, lasting 4 weeks, the students received direct instruction in Spanish on theories surrounding identity and social positioning, and engaged in seminars, creative writing, journaling, and performance activities in Spanish, exploring elements of their identities. We followed up on particular points of student interest and social issues that emerged, and designed activities like reading news and scholarly articles, watching films, examining poetry, songs, and short stories, writing journal entries, literary analyses, creative responses, and discussing and debating these issues. In the second phase, which lasted 9 weeks, students formed interest groups. One group focused on the experiences of ESOL students in the district, a second examined ways to improve HIV outreach in the Spanish-speaking community, and the final group focused on racial profiling of the Latino community by local law enforcement personnel. Next, members of each group read Spanish language news and scholarly articles and listened to film news clips and podcasts in Spanish on their topics, and collaboratively wrote a literature review in Spanish. From this lit review, they generated research questions. After some direct instruction on research methods, each group designed their study. They wrote approach scripts for participant recruitment and designed survey and interview protocols, wrote items, and used online survey tools. All texts were created originally in Spanish, though some were translated into English to reach English-speaking participants. The students then collected their data from community members. Once each group had collected their data, they transcribed their oral interview responses and wrote data summaries in Spanish. Any data collected in English were translated into Spanish. Next, after receiving direct instruction on thematic coding, the students generated themes and coded their data. Lastly, they wrote reports. Many more details about how we conducted these activities and how we integrated them with vocabulary and grammar instruction can be found within the article. In the third phase, which lasted for 5 weeks, the students presented their findings at slam poetry readings in the form of formal research reports and executive summaries that were delivered to teachers, parents, administrators, their research participants, and community partners, and in YouTube video documentaries that were shared with the community via posters and social media. They also wrote action request letters to local politicians, school administrators, and community organizations. The ESOL group also took explicit community service actions, serving as tutors and school home liaisons for local, recently arrived Spanish-speaking immigrant families. The YPAR project provided us with a language-rich environment. Each task that students completed as part of the YPAR process required them to use their Spanish in contextualized, cognitively demanding, community-engaged, and interdisciplinary ways. In doing so, it aligned easily with the World Readiness Standards, which also form the basis for our state-adopted standards for world language instruction. For example, throughout the project, students practiced interpersonal communication with their group mates, community research participants, and community partner organizations. In conducting their studies of identity and social issues, students explored cultural practices and perspectives on personal, interpersonal, and societal levels, and applied this knowledge to their data analysis and action plans. They made connections between their Spanish study and their other language art skills as they practiced different forms of writing, citation work, and literature review. They also employed other cross-disciplinary skills as necessary. For example, the law enforcement group drew and built upon their knowledge of government and the justice system. All groups also used basic statistical methods to analyze their survey data. They made many comparisons between Spanish and English, through translation in both directions, and as they applied their knowledge of writing conventions in English to Spanish. And while language educators often have difficulty finding meaningful ways to engage students in Spanish practice in the community and school beyond the classroom, the YPAR project offered all students in all groups constant opportunities to do so. More details about how the YPAR task related to the World Readiness Standards and 21st century skills, and how YPAR relates to other existing approaches for world language instruction can be found in the article. The second half of the article presents the findings of my study investigating student and teacher perceptions of language proficiency gains as a result of the YPAR project. To measure these gains and to compare those results to the statewide proficiency exit expectations, we used the Linguafolio assessment tools provided by the state. Details about my findings and the student evidences used to generate the data can be found within the article. But generally, according to both the teacher assessment and student self-assessments, students exhibited positive mean gain scores across all categories of communication skill, and all but one student finished the semester performing above course level in at least 3 of the 5 communicative domains. The largest gains were for written and spoken presentational communication. These strong positive gains could be partially due to the higher level of thinking YPAR tasks required. For example, in their previous coursework, the tasks required thinking at just the 2 lowest levels of the revised Bloom's taxonomy, remembering and understanding. In contrast, nearly all of the tasks from the YPAR project required the 4 highest levels of thinking, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Additionally, from an interdisciplinary perspective, because the language use required cross-disciplinary literacy and research skills, as well as access to other content areas like civics and health, the language that was necessary to meet these tasks was more demanding. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video, and I hope that you'll read the full article as well. I hope that you find it enjoyable and applicable to your work.